Part 2 of Day 9 Daily number 456, where we learn to be a better gamer. We just took a look at the part 1 of this game between dSeleCT and vileState, and essentially we talked about some of the basic aspects of the timing in the matchup, in particular this danger period of 9:30 to 12 minutes, where these medevacs pop up and give us a lot of crises. But for the most part, we identified 2 plays for vileState. His first play was to just straight up expand right off the bat. Like literally before anything. Okay, that's going to put pressure on my opponent economically. And then we're going to follow this play up with a second play, taking a third base really ridiculously quickly. And these are big things. I will note, going for Templar versus going for Colossus, I wouldn't necessarily call that a play, because it's not like a huge, big attack. Any expansion is big, is a huge ass deal. Let's go ahead and identify those plays again from the Terran side. Early expand, again, not as strong of a play because it wasn't an insta expand, but still it's kind of like a basic tent peg to the build. And following it up with a very fast medevac plus marine push. Okay, cool. We've done that. We're going to start watching the game a little bit more quickly. And what we're going to be identifying is the fact that no player necessarily has the advantage over the other one, and what they're going to be able to do in that spot. And this is, I think, where things tend to break down. I'll probably actually explicitly state, this is when the breakdown happens. And this is when people start to falter. Oh, that volume's loud. Is the in-game volume loud? It's not loud, but at the very least it's on. Alright, excellent. So, dSeleCT taking his expansion, excellent. He notices passivity, and because he identified passivity, he is able to take the third. He is able to go for these upgrades. Cool. Always do this. This is just bomb as shit, man. I love that. I love this factory play. This can be tricky because you have to micro like a boss. But I don't really want to emphasize the micro aspects as much. Holy cow, if this were a shoutcast, I would be going absolutely bonkerville right now. But I don't want the details of the sexy micro to override the underlying importance of some of these plays. The buildings are always the defining aspect of any strategy, not the units. Buildings you have all game long, so they will be shaping you all game long. How you microed that ghost in that one battle only happened in that one battle, not all game long. Gotta think about it in terms of the buildings. So cool. Another important aspect to this very marine-heavy style is that we ended up saving up enough gas to be able to both get these double upgrades that we see, 2-2 coming en route, but also the Ghost Academy is pretty important. And as dSeleCT sort of dynamically notices that his opponent is still being passive, in other words, he pushed the front, saw Templar, pushed the front, saw an expansion. Cool, he's just going to double expand. Take a third, take a fourth. And I actually need to come back to around 12 minutes. Cool. This is when dSeleCT actually began to add on these barracks. I want you to note that these 2 barracks and the 2 that are going to be added on right here, actually, I can even go to that. These 2 barracks, I mean, all these have been inactive for a long time. These got started at 11:30. They're only just now finishing up. So if we go to this army size tab, this army supply tab for dSeleCT is going to stay real low, a lot lower than vileState's, especially if you look at this worker count. Once State gets a couple of warp-ins, dSeleCT is going to be feeling a little bit uncomfortable. And you see suddenly, boom, right around 13 to 17 minutes is when suddenly the Protoss can start stepping into a lot more of an aggressive position. And why is that? Because Terran just doesn't have that big of an army. I mean, sure, this army supply tab doesn't look horrible for dSeleCT. I mean, you could probably control your way out of this, but keep in mind, these medevacs, for as amazing as they are, aren't attacking units. The unit tab reveals it a little more strongly. 17 Marines, 8 Marauders, versus Templar with Storm and 23 Zealots. Oh god, I didn't know I actually had that many Zealots. That's actually really good. So in this period, this is when it's key for Terran to be really careful and to make sure that he is not over-committing to drops, because he just doesn't really have that much back home, and his production is only just now kicked in. These ghosts that popped out are actually the first units that have popped out of these barracks, almost a full 3 minutes before those barracks even participated in the game. That's one thing that's obnoxious about Terran, is it just takes so damn long to get up. So State did a brilliant job defending. Then around 1330, no way Terran can really have that many units if he did this early medevac attack. So cool. I'm going to move out and expand. I'm leaving some High Templar around to be able to deal with stuff. Yep, there's a High Templar. Have to have a super watchful eye on the minimap, but vileState is, given his early triple expand, moving out about as early as he can. So, you know, I mean, I love Select, and he's super handsome, and he's going to be at the Green Forest land that I'll be at soon, but vileState, I think, is playing super crisp this game. I really like it. Really like it. Can't deny how good he be. So this is the general technique that players will tend to do. This can be quite dicey. If one of these drops goes awry, you can be super boned. But you just want to make sure that you can pin this army back. 2 nice feedbacks on the medevacs. Gateways, counter drops, respond to drops very nicely. Something like this happening is a total mega crisis. A super total mega crisis. This is exactly what State wants. And after a moment like this, as Protoss, especially if it is in that 13 or so to 16, 17 minute time zone, if you crush a drop that badly, you should just be jumping for joy. You're in good shape. Photon cannons being set up for drop. Another Templar will be warped in eventually. It's time to move on out. Time to move it out. So, at this point right here, this is where I'm going to pause. Okay. I had said at the very start of the daily, one of the big key concepts of strategy, we have like a play and a play and a play. That sentence sounded silly, so I'm not going to finish it. In any strategy, we have a sequence of plays that we perform, either attacks or expand timings, that have big impacts. That big attack that Select did was a play in a long sequence of plays that he'll be doing throughout the game. This is about the last basic play that we're going to see out of Protoss. In other words, if you were a young, up-and-coming Protoss, maybe in the Gold to Diamond League, somewhere in that range, you would be able to take your early expand, get the third up, defend everything, and then do this big maxed push. And you could literally follow that sequence game in, game out, but there tends to be a breakdown around now, where there's no clear next attack timing. Is there the infamous 21-minute Colossus timing? Well, no. There's no calculation that you can make. You have to use in-game judgment. And likewise, Select, generally, the Terran player wants to shut down this 4th, prevent it from getting up, and then slowly chip down this 3-base Protoss with 4 bases worth of gas. And with 4 bases of geysers, we can both get these 3/3 upgrades, we can get a lot of ghosts up, we can get all the Vikings we need if he starts pumping out Colossi. We're going to be in good shape. However, notice that neither player is exactly going to get a chance to do that. Big scary attack coming up by State. Almost always, again to simplify what I just said, almost always at this point of the game, only one player will have 4 bases. Almost always only one player will have 4 bases and win with that economy battle. Something like this is the moment where the Protoss will either win or get a game-changingly gigantic advantage. However, the Colossus gets caught a little bit off guard. Storms land. We're actually going to see Select loses the expansion and kills a good chunk of this army off. And suddenly, with all this going on, we are in a position where we are kind of even. So, from 13 to 16, 17 minutes, this is when the Protoss has some nice attack timings. And the Terran is in a little bit of the danger zone because the Terran needs to both get all his upgrades up, get his Ghost started, and get all his barracks started. But now, with all that started, this is where Terran starts to be able to begin to be aggressive again. And now both players have the components that they need to actually do aggression and defend against aggression. So it just becomes this zone of judgment where you gotta kind of like swim your way through what's going on. So that's what we're going to look at, and the way that we're going to do that is with, come on, hotkey. Wow, it took me like 6 presses of the 2 button. We're going to watch this from both players' point of view for the next little bit of time. I want to begin with vileStates because I think it's a little bit simpler from the Protoss point of view. He's pulling back as far back up as he can just to get a good essential mix of units up. First going to flood with some Zealots because he thinks that he might die, but then reinforce with a little bit of High Templar. And we're just going to note that there's these pylons planted here at the right flank. We still have this High Templar here. We've added a cannon. We're actually starting to cover a lot more of our bases. And I don't mean like, well, I guess I do mean like our bases. But I meant more cover all the range of possible things that could go wrong. The big thing that we're going to be doing as state is slowly scooping our way forward and moving our army in a way that protects these expansions. We don't really want to go balls out and try to kill him. We just want to try to make sure he doesn't get this 4th up or get our own 5th up. So State is actually just battling back and forth between here and really would love to just control this watchtower because that'll dictate what he does with his 5th base. But this really simple army movement where he's constantly doing little checks up here, probes moving out, trying to get rid of a couple of probes, kind of over-probed here. I mean, a drop goes on, but State just simply warps in a lot of stuff. But the important thing is that this army was kind of doing this, like on this part of the screen, and then the instant that he identified where the bulk of the army was, just set himself in between that and the expand. This is like super simple and moving up. It's not just that he's going to the center, he's cutting to the right and then going up the center and sort of wiggling this army back. Just slowly worming his way forward. And look, he moves all the way up here and may very well cut back and poke at this army from the backside. He'd like to be able to move here and then cut into it from that. Because if Protoss can, or actually in any circumstance, if you can get between the Terran player's reinforcements and his expansion, in other words right here, this expansion is literally completely dead. You always want to cut in instead of just going around to the vulnerable side. We see the good old crazy control battles, the biggest of anti-storms ever. The storms doing almost maximum damage to the Protoss units. Attack didn't seem to go very well. Attack really seemed to go poorly, and now Ghost, the direct counter to the Colossus, being able to take it down 1 damage at a time. And this looks pretty seriously grim for vileState, but he got this expand up. It actually is not as bad as it seems. It's really easy to just go, I lost that. But this is one of the most basic plays, and this is why I wanted to begin with vileState, is he had a huge army here at the, rewinding back a little bit, 18 minutes. He had this huge army, and he cut around to this side at around 20 minutes to push the Terran player up, move right, and then cut up. Love these sorts of cut-ins. I'm actually going to be zooming forward as we watch this battle just a little bit. And in terms of warp-ins, probably gearing up a warp-in on this side as a second follow-up. Just have to be careful. Like, this sort of Archon warp-in is really dangerous on that side. It's normal to kind of want to do it over there, but really, this is the most vulnerable location that we have. We want to make sure it's defended. So vileState, I think smartly, is cutting to the right before he moves upward. Absolutely love that nice, simple play to defend this bottom right. And Select continues to be really good. So notice how we keep cutting right and then up. Just really basic, good stuff. Stalker moving up here. And every time State cuts right, he starts to just plant more vision up. This is why we see players like, what's his face, Parting, getting a lot of additional observers, getting a lot of those pylons up. Stalkers cut back to the center, but for the most part, State would have liked to shut down that fourth. He doesn't really have to, but the only thing he really would like to do is just make sure that there's not too much expanding going on up here. But with the amount of damage he's been doing, it's kind of impossible for Terran to expand too much to that side. Right now, he's just having to defend against these drops from this angle. And this is one of the most dangerous moves that can be made. This is super dangerous. This is like so scary. Oh my god, this is like big potential issue. If we are caught out of position, or if we're here, Select could defend from this angle, and he has reinforcements coming in. So technically we can retreat away from his army, kind of no problem. But the more dangerous issue is that any drops that happen here, any counter plays where he decides to walk down with his army and kill this off, there's very little that we can do about it. Also, you'll note that I'm going to go into Select's nuking in a little bit. It shuts down our ability to cover the map, and as a result, prevent these sorts of things from happening. Select doing some nice nukes, but basically State will end up continuing to pull back to the right again and again and again and again. And even though he wants to kill off this army, he kind of has to commit himself to moving along this right side. Now, this is often why you see a player just beating down the exact same door again and again. Like State, sure, he took down this expansion, but he's kind of continuing to just work this side, work this side, work this side. And the time when things really went wrong is when he attacked this left side. But this is actually okay, because State is trying to just keep pressure on Select while gobbling up one expansion at a time. And what happened when State lost his whole army? He replenished, pushed up along this edge, and took another expansion. In other words, State is doing an excellent job with this one army movement. He's not splitting his army up. He's not doing, drops up here. He's not doing DT stuff. We want to make sure that we see the one army movement again and again and again. And by focusing on that one expansion at a time in the bottom right, and more importantly, focusing on a single big army, he has the ability to do this, to eventually break Select and to take this top side. So, essentially, State, for all the fanciness that happened in the early game, followed a fairly fundamental play of moving to the right and moving up with the expands behind. One of the most basic tactics. And we got to see pretty clearly how, when there was this moment where we attacked this expansion from the side over here, our whole army has to pull back down this way. The entire retreat path for the army doesn't contribute at all to these two expansions' defense. And when he was able to drill big straight through the main, he did himself a good ton of damage. Now, what I want to do in this moment is come to the Select cam. This is when Select is at the 21-minute mark. We've just backed up 10 minutes. And we're going to see, the usual good control. I'm just going to assume for the time being that any Terran who's watching right now understands that I need to have good ghost control, shoot the carriers, or excuse me, shoot the Colossus with the Vikings. I need a kite with my Marine Marauder. I think every Terran knows that. Whether, you know, you can execute it or not, or that sort of thing, I'm not really going to worry about that at this point in time. It's more of the big tactical decision-making type things. Select absolutely bear mauls this. And by the way, I will never stop giving Select shit about his really weird army setup. 1 is his infantry, 3 is his Vikings, 4 is his medevac, 6 is his ghosts, with 5 and 7 being his buildings. He like hockeys all his buildings with his upgraders. Select. Select. Okay, that was fun. Okay, so I think that in vileState's condition, the only thing that we would have wanted a little bit more was this map control and center. It would have helped us dictate what to do with these stalkers, to be able to position them here, to have to pull them back with our army, and then make a big shove up mid. Select needs to do a lot more focus on the vision control because he's going to be doing some pretty big drops. Saw some earlier drops happen. I'm not going to concern us with that too much because this is again the moment where things might start to seem a little bit confusing. When no one's really getting the advantage. I mean, you have to have really good control of Select, and it takes a special kind of Terran to not absolutely freak himself out when he sees that huge army. But we're going to see essentially a withdrawal of units as a drop moves out. And when the drop starts to succeed in any way, this army is going to start to move forward again. So notice right now, Select, cramped back. How does he get an edge? Any edge that Terran wants to get, any edge that a player wants to get, has to be good at, has to be focused on expansions. I either want to shut expanding down or gain more expansions myself. Select is going to do this by just getting some good army positioning. So this drop, don't think of it as this drop could kill off a base, because Select actually has no idea that there's an expansion here. He has no idea. He's moving there, but he doesn't have a damn clue. He's scanning mid, seeing what's up there, getting a sensor tower up, very defensively positioned. Don't want to be defensive all game long. No one wants to be defensive all game long. No one likes a defensive person. So here, we're going to see some real sexy stuff. Okay, moving it up. Okay, so this starts to happen. Notice right as the drop happens, boom, the army starts to move. I'm actually going to back up 20 seconds to 24 minutes and 30 seconds. Look at this blue blob here. See it up on the minimap there? As we listen to this plane come over. Okay, here's the drop happening. Look at the blue blob on the minimap. Doing the drop, boom, instantly walking, literally sprinting towards mid. Because one of two things is going to happen. He's either going to bring lots of units back, like this, and we see a glimpse. He's either going to bring these units back and give up control of mid, or he's going to stay in mid and this drop is going to do damage. So, excellent. Select has now gobbled up a huge edge by getting this vision control. This is going to permit him to do these sorts of tactics. Like this nuke is not just, oh derp, I hope he doesn't notice that I nuked. This ghost combined with this army movement, combined with this drop, is repositioning the Protoss army a little bit at a time. So suddenly, this nuke happens, and we can dynamically see, oh, there's an army here. Better go back and drop. This drop was patiently waiting until we could see vision of the army. This, we can see much more clearly now why this is a mistake. If you had the vision of everything, you just kind of say something like, oh yeah, he dropped here when this attack was coming, oh darn. But when you see it from Select's perspective, you see, ah, this thing moved up here, which invited this drop in. And you know what? If that army was hanging out here, we would drop and then pull back and then move forward with our huge force again.
We could use some help here. Ready to blunder.
So again, this push from vileState ended up losing this expansion, and this encourages Select to continue to nuke because he knows exactly where the army position is.
Upgrade complete.
And the 35 kill Ghost is really cool.
Get me out of this mess.
So, at this point in the game, we've done some cool nuking. We've taken out some ghosts. We've almost nuked ourselves. And there's a statement I've made a lot of times in a row. The edge that you almost always want to get in a game is the expansion and resource edge. Obviously, he's not really mining from this, not really mining from that, starting to mine from this. Hell, he has 37 workers. Hell, ignore the number of bases that he has, because these two aren't really functioning. This one's half functioning. This one's not functioning. This one's running low. We got some mined out dudes here. The economic state of vileState is bad. Look at the mineral income. Holy crap. So what this means is, remember this stalemate situation I was talking about again and again and again? We're taking that stalemate situation where we both have our perfect unit mix, and we're going to engage in these perfect unit mix battles, and dSeleCT know that I can just rebuild the exact same unit mix thanks to this ridiculous amount of cash I have in the bank.
Upgrade.
All I have to do
Vespene
is
geyser
not mess
exhausted.
up with my control, which is much easier said than done.
Additional supply. Nuclear
But
missile.
remember that drop that we saw just a moment ago? Well, it was killed off, so now dSeleCT is having to move forward. With this drop not in play, it's much harder to manipulate the position of this army. We actually have to engage this army directly. And I would say, on average, I think Protosses are a little more comfortable in these direct engagements, just because, I mean, not in the absolute highest levels. You know, if you're playing against Marine King Prime, you actually just don't even want to be in the game, but your average Protoss bear is going to be a little more comfortable because it's easier, I think, to just move Colossi back and forth than it is to sort of cloak and snipe and EMP properly without getting your ghosts horrifically out of position. The Colossi can just crawl all over everything. I don't even know why I'm making a point of this. I'm saying that in some circumstances it may or may not be the case that one could or potentially could not find the battle easier or harder. That's a useful thing to say. Thank God I have a TV show. The important thing to note is that dSeleCT has been bashing our opponent down a lot. And it's not represented in this army size tab. It's instead represented in the bank. I love to joke about the trust fund in the bank. In these long-term games, it's all about the trust fund. And once again, with his army being in one place, our drops are going to be strong. All about manipulating these angles. So our Vikings end up getting a little bit out of position. Our ghosts end up getting a little bit out of position. And the game starts to go absolutely apeshit. We will watch this nuke before the end of part 2 because it succeeds in dSeleCT nuking both of his own ghosts.
This better be.
But it's very key to note that in this position that we see, looks really good for vileState. In the army tab, looking real sharp. But the economy is still in just absolute tatters. Way better income. And we're going to see dSeleCT sort of pull his way back. Part 2 is all about that mid-game positioning and both players gaining little edges. And we saw that the big leap forward for vileState twice is when he just killed off a big, annoying, threatening drop. The first time at the 13-minute mark. Actually, I don't even know if I can go to 13 minutes, but I'll try. It was a drop that happened right here. I believe around 13:30-ish, is that right? Nah, it must have been later than that. It must have been around 15. But this big drop, when this drop got shut down, when's the drop going to happen? Here it is. There's the drop moving along the minimap. This drop at the 15-minute mark, right after this failed, this is when State was able to leap into action to the middle of the map. And likewise, at the 27-minute mark, once dSeleCT lost these two medevacs here, this is also when State had the opportunity to leap forward. And I don't want you to think of it in terms of the percentage of the time a drop's floating around. It's, can I manipulate his army? Can't I manipulate his army? If you're not really in a good position to manipulate the army positioning of Protoss, you might have struggles in some of these long-term battles. So dSeleCT is awesome. I'm just going to go to break. Yeah.